This powerful cartoon from Mike Lukovich practically jumped off the screen and smacked me in the face when I saw it earlier today. While Trump's misogynist mouthpiece sits in front of Congress yapping about justice, the UK is actually taking steps to get justice. Here in the US, we're just creating more victims. And the Brits see us for exactly who we are right now.
In the United States, they have been very, very timid. And I think a lot of people in the States say, look, over in the UK, you are behaving morally and properly and have an appropriate sense of outrage about what's been going on. Here in the United States, we appear to have lost that a bit.
It definitely looks like we have lost that. Where is the outrage?
Well, I think that is really what is at the heart of this case. I think that what this case reveals is that for many years and many decades, we've had a two-tiered system of justice, well, since the beginning of this country's history, but that it favored the rich and powerful, and it didn't matter what party you belonged to, that you would be shielded from accountability, even from the grossest and most disgusting crimes.
And that is not unique to the United States. Many countries have two systems of justice, one for the wealthy and one for everyone else. But how are those systems crashing down in the UK, taking out elected officials and royals alike? While here in the US, they just shrug and act like nothing can be done. Let's dive into some interesting perspectives from the Brits and some updates from the U.S. House Oversight Committee. But first, make sure you subscribe to Raw America because we just launched this channel a couple of months ago, and our community is growing faster than the number of Brits caught looking rough whilst riding in a car. All right, this Epstein stuff is tough. It's really difficult to talk about. So how about a little levity before we get going here? Okay. So the photo of Prince, formerly known as Prince Andrew, after his arrest prompted somebody to put this meme together, and it is brilliant. My colleague sent it to me while I was working on this story, and I took the liberty of making it into a vision board for us here in the United States. Okay. Hopefully this will be the meme we can make when some of Epstein's U.S. buddies are in the car riding off to the slammer. All right, we can dream, can't we? All right, let's get into it. And I want to start with a rare public appearance this week from Prince William. He was speaking on BBC One's Life Hacks.
I think suicide prevention is something that I've sort of found myself getting more and more involved in and wanting to talk about. But trying to find the language to talk about it has been quite tricky. I've been involved in trying to make mental health awareness a thing for the last few years, and I think the journey on that has brought us to a place to talk about suicide prevention. And what I'm not sure people will know is the amount of young people, particularly men, who are affected by suicide. It's the biggest killer of young men in the UK a year. So 6,500 men under the age of 45 go through some sort of attempt to suicide. And I think it's a real national catastrophe, really, that we don't talk about it enough. Now, I've been going through my own journey, understanding how to talk about it publicly, because I want to make sure I'm sensitive to this issue, and I'm very glad there's people better qualified to talk about this than me here today. But from my own experiences and my own understanding of it with those in the community of mental health and services to help, I felt something like this today is a really good way to reach out to young guys, particularly, who unfortunately are more affected by suicide than women.
Yikes, William. This episode came out one day before his uncle, formerly known as Prince Andrew, was arrested. And of course, men's mental health is important. Everyone's mental health is important. And there's certainly an argument that could be made right now that a whole lot of suffering is happening at the hands of a bunch of emotionally and mentally unwell men. But considering that the mental and emotional well-being of Epstein's victims were ignored for decades, and particularly considering that Andrew's most well-known victim, Virginia Giuffre, died by suicide less than a year ago because of what the public and Andrew did to her, these comments from William are bad timing, to say the very least. And before we continue, let's remember that Virginia Giuffre was handed over to Andrew after she met Trump, Epstein, and Maxwell at Mar-a-Lago. Okay, now back to the Prince William bit, and LBC's Sheila Fogarty had a very similar reaction to his remarks.
But to take time out to talk about your own mental health and the mental health of men, when we are looking at women so shattered, I'm talking about the heart of this story, women so shattered by the abuse that they experienced, that they are either already dead from taking their own lives or struggling daily with their mental health and with their attempt to get justice and accountability. They're the people whose mental health the royal family should be talking about. And I don't mean just in a little throwaway line in a written statement about victims at the forefront of our minds. That they should be, and I hope they are sincere about that. But what makes me doubt their sincerity about that, as to them being the absolute priority, the victims being the absolute priority, is when one of the few public utterances from the Prince of Wales in a while that isn't just part of his role, for example, the Saudi visit, is about his own mental health. Like I say, as far as I'm concerned, it's noise. What you say, particularly about mental health and emotional well-being, is noise until you tell the police and others what you knew about Andrew's activities and alleged activities.
That was so well said, and a perfect example of how much pressure the UK is putting on everyone right now, even those who are only tangentially connected to the crimes of Jeffrey Epstein, while here in the US, it's crickets. And Andrew's arrest and the ongoing intense investigation into his actions is leading to a crisis of conscience by many in the UK who are questioning the role of the monarchy and its power moving forward.
So you're left with, but might it be constitutionally useful? And you're absolutely right. A monarchy can be a kind of prophylactic, a barrier between a people and an overmighty prime minister or president. And you look to the United States at the moment and think about that. Who does Trump have? Who can restrain him? Well, the answer right now is the Supreme Court, it seems. But traditionally, you might have thought that a monarchy, and you give the Spanish example, would be able to do that. That requires a monarchy sufficiently self-confident and experienced enough to intervene when a prime minister goes too far. But I think that the result of the Andrew scandal is the loss of a few palaces, the loss of quite a lot of public money, and if Scotland ever went independent, absolutely the loss of the Kingdom of Scotland, because the Scots wouldn't put up with this. So I think it has done real, lasting damage to the monarchy. It won't be an overthrowing, a sort of Republican revolt of some kind. It'll be a slow decline and the paring back, because they have lost a huge amount of public sympathy and support.
And this attitude is after the royal family has taken Andrew's actions seriously, at least much more seriously than anyone has taken Trump's actions stateside.
I think one thing to say immediately is that, so far as we can tell, the king himself has behaved impeccably, and he has done exactly the right thing in trying, quite brutally in a sense, to cut off his younger brother, saying that, the law must be allowed to take its course, absolutely no ifs, no buts. And I read that when he was still Prince of Wales, Charles was against the appointment of Andrew as a trade envoy in the first place, saying that it would end badly, as indeed it has.
Action has been taken by the monarchy, the government, and law enforcement in the UK, and it still might not be enough to keep the royal family in people's good graces. That's how bad these crimes are, and that is how seriously they are taking these crimes in the UK. That's not to say that everyone is ignoring Epstein's co-conspirators here in the U.S. Congressional Representative Melanie Stansbury went on MS Now today, pushing to use Andrew's arrest as an example of just how complicit and guilty the U.S. DOJ looks when compared to the U.K.
And you said, quote, "If a prince can be held accountable, so can a president." Do you expect Andrew's arrest to move the needle toward accountability for others?
Well, I certainly hope so. I think the unprecedented arrest and investigation of the former Prince Andrew sets an example, not only for the world, but especially for the United States, where we have a president that is not only refusing to act on the Epstein files, but engaged in a direct cover-up, and whose DOJ has refused to acknowledge the survivors, that has refused to investigate crimes, that has refused to actually bring indictments and prosecutions. And you can tell that the president is feeling the heat because, as we all know, when Donald Trump is under the gun, his recampments and his pushback are often an admission of guilt. And I think we've seen that the last few days. Now, the administration is failing to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act. They've only released a small amount of what we think may be a massive amount of documentation and records. But even in the 3 million files that they dumped a few weeks ago, we see lists of names of prominent figures, including the president and other well-known actors in this space. We see FBI tip sheets, partial investigations, and a number of correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein, where the administration chose to redact names. Myself, Thomas Massey, Ro Khanna, and others have been putting names in the public domain. But it's important, we're not prosecutors. We are Congress. We are doing our oversight responsibilities. But it is the Department of Justice's job to investigate and prosecute these crimes. And I know a lot of people are angry and frustrated that the U.S. is not acting, but that is the Department of Justice's job. And that's why we have to continue to put pressure on them.
Absolutely. Pressure, 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 because we refuse to let Donald Trump's latest social media tantrum distract us from the job that the U.S. DOJ should be doing to get justice for the victims and survivors and to get these predators off the street. Let's put that vision board up again. Isn't that a sight to see? And when that vision board comes true, we are going to talk all about it right here on Raw America. So make sure you subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. And before you go, leave a comment and remember to share this video with someone in your life so we can keep these important conversations going and keep growing this community. For Raw America, I'm Corinne Straight, and I'll see y'all next time.